AITA for wanting to kick my brother, 30M, the family golden child, after he cursed at me in my own home where he doesn't contribute financially or in any other way. When I, 28F, was looking for a job, my brother offered to let me stay with him. Grateful, I took on all household chores, cleaning, cooking, everything. My boyfriend, 29, supported me by bringing groceries daily. After a month, I replaced a trash bin swarming with worms, which upset my brother and led him to kick me out. I moved in with my boyfriend, and soon after, found a great job and home. We invited my brother to stay with us rent-free to help him save money. However, he didn't lift a finger around the house and became fixated on a TV I bought. He spent all day watching it. One evening, I announced dinner was ready, but he ignored me to change the channel. I switched it back to something we could all enjoy, but he insisted on his choice. When I asked for the remote, he refused and eventually threw it on the floor in a rage. I confronted him about his lack of contribution to the household, which led to him screaming and cursing at me. The next day, my mother called, blaming me and insisting I should be polite to him because he was a guest in our home. 2 weeks ago, I broke my ankle and last Friday, my mother called again. I didn't comment on the fight, but she cried, saying my brother had to order takeout because there was no food. I realized I had forgotten to eat due to my work deadlines, yet my brother's need for takeout was prioritized. Today, my brother approached me, ostensibly to apologize for cursing at me but immediately demanded I apologize as well, claiming he was in the right. When I refused, he accused me of having a disorder and cut ties with me, echoing our mother's words. My boyfriend believes my brother suffers from favoritism. Edit more details from OP. My parents divorced when I was around 13 because my father, 59, cheated on my mother, 59. I've been no contact with my father for over 10 years. For some reason, my mother blamed me for their divorce. She used to come to my bed late at night, shake me, and tell me I was the cause of her failed marriage. We never had a good relationship, but the divorce made everything worse. Whenever we had a problem, she would say I was sick in the head, crazy, and in urgent need of help. As a 14-year-old who didn't know better, I sought help and made an appointment with a therapist. The therapist insisted on seeing my mother too. I don't know what the therapist told her, but we never went back. Sometimes, my mother would claim the therapist said I was crazy and a psychopath. If that were true, why didn't my mother help by taking me back to the therapist? Isn't that what mothers do? Help their kids? I have a brother, 30M, the golden child, who received all the nice things and praise while we were growing up, like any other golden child. I won't go into detail about how he's the golden child and I'm the unwanted kid, or we'd be here forever. My brother and I are both university graduates. I studied abroad for my postgraduate degree and returned last year to look for a job in my home country. I wanted to work in the city where I studied, where my long-term boyfriend lives, where all my friends are, and, of course, where my mother doesn't exist. While I was job hunting, my brother offered to help, and I moved in with him. He used to live alone in an old student apartment. I was so grateful that I cleaned the house, prepared our meals, did the laundry. Basically, I did everything around the house. My long-term boyfriend, 29M, is good friends with my brother. He used to come for dinner every night, and we'd hang out. My boyfriend felt responsible for me and brought bags of groceries every day to cover what he and I ate. I'm a very independent woman and did my best not to become a burden on my brother, financially or emotionally. After a month, during the holidays, my brother went to visit our mother while I went with my boyfriend to visit his amazing parents, by the way. We left a day earlier than my brother and specifically told him to take out the garbage before leaving because we'd be away for 10 days in the middle of summer. We returned a day earlier, and guess what? He left the trash bin on the counter as it was, swarming with hundreds of worms. I was cleaning the house and threw the bin away. We bought a new trash bin, mind you, the exact same bin in the same color. When my brother returned a day later, I told him what happened. He started yelling, his face turned red with veins popping, and he started berating me. He screamed at me and blamed me for making decisions in his home without asking him first. It was his house, and I had no right to throw the bin away. It didn't matter if it was a $2 bin, it was his. I couldn't believe my ears. I was being yelled at over a trash bin that I replaced. I told him I would do the same thing again if it happened because it was gross. He then told me to leave his house. I did and moved in with my boyfriend and his roommate. The next day, my mother called and asked me what happened. She asks these questions, but she never listens. She believes what she wants to believe. When I tried to explain my side, it meant nothing to her. So, I told her I didn't want to talk about what happened. She said, "It's your fault. It's his house. You don't have the right to his stuff. He's your brother, and you have to obey him." I lived with my boyfriend and his roommate for 5 months. They're both lovely people who never made me feel unwanted even for a second. It was a tough time for me, no home, no job, no money. Not long after, I found an amazing job, an amazing house, and my boyfriend and I moved in together. I wanted to help my brother like he helped me. His house was falling apart, old, dirty, inconvenient, and pretty expensive for just one person. I told him he could live with us for a couple of months, save money, and find a better place. I told him not to worry about rent and utilities because we're family, right? Isn't that what family does for each other? It turned out to be a good call because a week later, our country went crazy with the coronavirus. He moved in with us just in time. My boyfriend and I started buying furniture, a happy lamp here, a little table there, and it became our home that we built together. My brother never cooked, cleaned, bought groceries, or offered any help around the house. It was inconvenient, but he was our guest, and I was repaying my debt to him. 2 weeks later, I bought a TV for all of us. This is important. My brother became obsessed with this TV. He would watch movies, documentaries, and shows all day, every day. Since we were working from home, he had all the time in the world. One day, my boyfriend and I were preparing a meal in the kitchen. I told my brother the food was ready. He turned the TV on and left the room. We eat in the living room. While I was setting the table, I switched the channel to a news channel. He came back and complained about the news and switched the channel back. I told him we should all watch something we can enjoy together. He insisted that he came first and that we would watch what he wanted. I told him to switch it back. He didn't. I asked him to give me the remote control. He refused, and after demanding it the 10th time, he threw it on the floor. I told him he couldn't throw things in my house because they didn't belong to him. I told him he wasn't doing anything around the house to help, but at least let us rest and enjoy our lives while we can. For context, both my boyfriend and I are studying for our postgraduates, have jobs, and work in the house. My brother stood up and started yelling. He screamed that his job was difficult while mine was easy. He was working his ass off, and we were just writing emails for the show. I told him I wouldn't apologize for having a nice job, not necessarily easy, but it pays well. I worked hard for what I have. He belittled me and my achievements. I won't lie, I did the same to him. I belittled his achievements. Then he cursed at me, which is a taboo for me, by the way. My mother curses at me for the simplest, stupidest things, so it's become a taboo for me, something I would never do to my family. I find it very rude and unforgivable. We stopped talking. The next day, my mother called me and asked what happened. I refused to answer. She said it was my fault and told me to be polite to him because he was a guest in our house. We made him uncomfortable. He's my brother, and I have to obey him. If there hadn't been a lockdown, she would have come and placed her kid in a better house. A 30-year-old man-child. Hypocrite? Yeah, I know. It's been 3 months since we stopped talking. 2 weeks ago, I broke my ankle and started working from home again. Last Friday was tough for me. I had assignments, Excel sheets I needed to work on, and this constant, excruciating pain in my ankle. Late at night, my mother called and asked me to listen to her about my brother. I told her I could listen, but only listen. Nothing she said could change what I thought, and I refused to comment on the fight we had with my brother. She started crying and told me my brother had to order takeout because there was no food in the house. I realized I was so busy working and trying to meet deadlines that I forgot to eat. Of course, my brother had to order takeout. Unthinkable. Today, I was lying down and watching TV. He stopped watching it after the fight. My brother came to me and said, "As your brother, I'm apologizing for cursing at you. I know I'm right in the fight, so I expect you to apologize." I told him I did nothing wrong and wasn't going to apologize. He said I was 100% in the wrong. When I refused, he told me I was sick in the head. I was crazy and ill. He said these things as if my mother was talking. He told me I had narcissistic personality disorder. I was selfish, spoiled, self-centered, and all the dirty things, as he claimed. He told me he was done, and I was dead to him. I asked my boyfriend what he thought. He said my brother suffers from favoritism. I remembered that 14-year-old girl now. Should I do what I did years ago? Am I being manipulated into thinking I'm mentally ill, as they claimed? I usually blame myself for everything. I went to 2 more therapists, one overseas and one here. After our talks, they told me I wasn't mentally ill. I don't know. When someone tells you something for years, you start to doubt yourself. What if they're right? What if I'm right? What do I do? First update. After reading your comments and discussing them with my BF, I decided to call my mother and explain what really happened. So, I called her and tried to tell the story from my perspective. I started by saying, "I am not you, and your worldview doesn't necessarily reflect mine." She interrupted me countless times, as usual. She didn't try to see things from my side at all. As we all guessed, she sided with my brother. It was a 1-hour call, so I might skip some details, but I remember her blaming me for leaving food in the refrigerator for my brother. Apparently, paying the bills, cleaning, doing the laundry, and cooking weren't enough. I also had to call him to the table and make sure he ate. Her exact words were, "You're treating him as if he's a stray dog." Let that sink in. Surprisingly, she didn't know my brother doesn't pay for anything. Conveniently, my brother forgot to mention this to her. She denied always siding with him. I challenged her to give me just one example when she sided with me. She couldn't. Well, of course not. At the end of our call, I told her I'm used to not having a mother in my life, but if she truly loves my brother, she should stop spoiling him. He's never had a girlfriend, doesn't have friends, and is the most selfish person I've ever seen. He expects everything to be served on a silver platter. She was shocked, as if she never realized my brother doesn't have anyone else besides us. I asked her to think about what I'd said and call me back in 2 hours if she agreed with me. To my surprise, she did call and told me I'm a very compassionate and good-hearted person. This could be the first time she's ever said something nice about me. I thanked her and asked for a favor, but she had to accept beforehand. She agreed, and I asked her to stay out of our arguments with my brother. He always thinks he's right because she unconditionally sides with him. It's always 2 against 1 when it comes to me. We'll see if she keeps her promise. Later that night, I walked into my brother's room and told him I was hurt, not because he threw the TV remote or didn't follow my rules, but because I didn't deserve to be called names in my own house at the age of 28. He apologized for swearing and screaming and agreed not to do that anymore. I told him I'm not the sole decision maker in our house and have to respect my boyfriend's wishes too. Since he's been a burden for us emotionally, financially, and physically, we both would appreciate it if he could find his own place as soon as possible. I assured him that even though he kicked me out, I would never do that to him. My boyfriend told him he could stay with us until he found his own place. He's still with us. He tries to help around the house. Yesterday, he asked if he could watch TV. LOL. My boyfriend knows he's a keeper now. Second update. After writing my update, I asked my brother if he intends to follow our plan for him to move out by the end of August. He raised his eyebrows and kept quiet. I told him we had an agreement, we showed respect and patience, but he hasn't changed one bit. He got offended and left the room, saying, "There's a right time for everything." He already has a job that he's been working for 3 years, but he applied for another job and is currently waiting for a response. I didn't even know he'd applied for a new job until recently. He's reluctant to move out before getting an answer, so he wants to wait and see. I understand why he's doing what he's doing, but 5 minutes later, Mother called and told me we kicked him out. I can't understand how I ended up being the bad guy who kicked out her brother. I repeatedly told her that I didn't kick him out, but she didn't listen, as always. I told her again that my brother doesn't pay or do anything. My bonuses were cut because of my ankle. The project my boyfriend was working on got suspended for 4 months. Moreover, my boyfriend is about to finish his thesis, so he's very stressed out. We're having financial difficulties, and I'm spending my emergency fund. My brother knows this and still didn't even offer to pay for anything. He even told me he saved up $30,000 since he moved in with us. I don't want his money. I don't need his money. But it would be nice if he offered. Mother told me she's going to tell him to pay our rent. I told her to stay out of our arguments like we agreed. She believes she should meddle in our lives as if we're children. I understand she's trying to help, but at the end of the day, she makes everything worse. I feel she doesn't care about solving the problem, she just wants to find the guilty party. It's always me. The next day when we came home and saw my brother cooking, he works from home, he cooked for us for the following days and told me that he can cover the rent and utilities. I kindly declined his offer. I didn't tell him this, but I know for a fact that if I accept his money, my mother and brother will remind me of it for the rest of my life. They have this urge to remind you of every little thing they do for you. A couple of days ago, my brother and I got into one of our silly arguments. He again started yelling and screaming. I just kept quiet and watched him. I tried to understand why he was so angry. I asked, "Why are you yelling at me as if I'm your enemy?" He stopped and started crying. He told me he thinks he's misunderstood, and it frustrates him. At that moment, my heart ached, and I hugged him. He cried on my shoulder and kissed me on the cheek. We ended the argument with smiles. Yesterday, he took me out shopping, and we had dinner, just the 2 of us. I know many of you are disappointed with me. I'm one of those people who believe others' mistreatment of us might be a cry for help. I'm trying to be a good sister. P.S. 5 minutes after writing this update, my boyfriend asked for another date, but he got offended and didn't respond. I keep asking him every day to see if he ever gives me an answer. BF said he doesn't have the patience and will be staying with his friend until my brother moves out. Now, I find myself pressuring him to move out, and it sickens me. I don't want to kick him out and turn into him. What do I do? Last edit. My brother moved into his new house. He says he's still paying for his new furniture. He even invited us for dinner. I'm still with my BF, and we're so happy, just the 2 of us. My mother, on the other hand, is upset that I kicked him out before the coronavirus vaccine. Everything is fine. It's a happy ending.